Hello. Hey, thank you so much for getting everyone situated and everything like that. So today's talk is HTML5 design, and I'm really happy and thank everyone at O'Reilly Media for setting this up. So let's just get started. There's a lot of great content out there, and also another question that people always ask me: will the slides be available? And yes, they will be. If you follow my Twitter handle, which is Teleject, TELEJECT, it will. I'll post the link to the slides after they're done. So just let you guys know about that. So with that, let's move on into the presentation because there's just so much content to cover. All right, so slide number 2. Things are good between us, XHTML and Write. I mean, we both get along well and we both like stuff. I mean, we both like marking up content. We all like putting the content out there and doing a good job. But there's something kind of wrong, and we can't really just maybe continue seeing each other. And so next slide. So, and one of those things is kind of brings home to the point of like why there's a problem with XHTML is Mark Pilgrim has a really great quote. It's like, imagine you made a browser that only rendered sites authored in valid HTML or XHTML. How much of the web would your users be able to see? 1%, 0.1%, or less? And actually, like we can actually kind of do a good scientific study. And actually, the people at Opera actually did a study, and they actually looked at over 100,000 websites and determined like which one of these sites are actually valid, which ones come back invalid. And in the slide, it's kind of a representation, a percentage representation that all the red is like a percentage of all the websites that they looked at that were invalid, and the green bar at the bottom represents all the sites that were valid. And so less than 5% of the websites that they looked at, over like hundreds of thousands of websites, were actually invalid. And so, the web doesn't come to a screeching halt when, if your site's invalid. So what is the purpose of XHTML then? It's like if we have to do all this valid stuff like that. So, and the thing about XHTML, let's go to the next slide, is that it's really quite painful to update all this information and all that's not information, but all the XHTML. It's pretty easy to build templates that are compliant or valid with XHTML. What really gets hard is living with XHTML. It's like Kismet, like love at first sight. Everything's structured, everything's valid. The validator loves us. Our web designer friends love us. However, when we hand it off to a client or we put it into a CMS system, it's really hard to deal with. And so it's actually kind of painful to make sure everyone knows about closing p tags, knows how to close out an image tag with in XHTML. So it's really kind of hard to deal with it. And so the next slide is a quote from Sir Tim Berners-Lee, where he says, the attempt to get the world to switch to XML, including quotes around attribute values and flashes and empty tags and namespaces all at once, didn't work. And when you have like the father of the internet and a knight telling you that it didn't work, like HTML, you have a problem. And there's also, so that's just one big problem, but there's also another problem. Let's go to the next slide. Is that you have to realize there are browsers out there that just have a hard time rendering things that you want them to have rendered. I mean, I like to take a poll, not take a poll, but if you're on Twitter, hashtag I think is a really great. I know we have a hashtag of HTML5, but a really good hashtag would be HTML5 design, because the HTML5 hashtag is used a lot. So one good one is HTML5 design. If you could, just tweet with the hashtag, like how many people still have to deal with IE6. It's usually when I give this talk, it's usually like 10% to maybe 20% of the crowd still has to deal with some older version of IE, and it's still kind of painful to build with those browsers. And so, so we have to keep that in mind that IE is still floating around, still in the background. They did announce today that the Microsoft announced today that they're actually going to auto update the browser. And I think this is really good because it's kind of response to what Firefox and Chrome are doing, where it's kind of infinite version of the browser that the browser you have on your desktop will just automatically update to the latest and greatest version of it. And so that way they kind of get away from having to potentially have multiple fractured copies of IE to support down the road. And so, but thankfully, IE support is dropping down as we continue on. And also, if you look on the slide, you can see like every time Angela Jolie adopts a baby, the IE fixed browser market share goes down. So Angela Jolie is doing her share to help reduce IE. So, and our next slide is kind of a physical representation of like when I first started out, working with the web. I didn't really care about HTML elements and what they were. I just like coded everything up. I put tables everywhere. And it was only later that I realized, there's actually a structure to it, and that, really clean code goes a long way. And so, but also there's kind of like limitations to it. So that's why I think we all did in the beginning, was trying to use as much HTML elements to get what we wanted to do with web page design. And so I want to take a quick poll out there. Is if Anson helps set the poll out there, is like how many HTML4 elements do you think they are? So that you can do the poll and we'll find out how many HTML4 elements people think there are. So all right. But I don't know, someone can take a while, I guess. So what happens is, let's go to the next slide. There's actually 91 HTML4 elements. And so this is a great trick, not trick, I don't think it's a trick, but if you ask a web developer, hey, just ask how many HTML elements are there, you usually will get like 5 to 25 elements out there that they'll get. But there's actually 91 elements. Some of them are kind of obscure that we don't like really use every day, but there are actually 91 elements. And that's really great. That's really good that we have all these kind of building blocks, if you will, to build like almost like an infinite number of web pages out there, build things. But it does have some limitations. And so if you go to the next slide, number 9. The world, we're running out of space, with these tools in order to build what we want to build. There's only a finite number of HTML elements that we can work with. HTML5 does add new elements, but we still have this kind of like limited structure that XHTML, which is built off of HTML4, that we still have to work with. And so there was some solution with this. Go to the next slide. Is with Microformats. And this is a photo of Contact, and he's kind of like the leader, brains behind Microformats. And if you never have heard of Microformats, I would, if you take anything away from this presentation, I would say definitely go check out Microformats and go check out a book called Microformats Made Simple. It's by Emily Lewis, and it's a great introduction to Microformats and how it used. But basically, the gist of Microformats is that we take these simple HTML elements and we put them into a structured pattern, if you will, a design pattern for more complex pieces of data. Say for a resume, there's actually a pattern or standard way that we could use for coding up and marking up a resume. The same goes for contact information. The same way it goes for contact information, including like business address and stuff like that, but also for recipes and stuff like that. And so what's really great is that we also have big websites like Facebook and Google always recognizing the value of these formats and indexing sites up in like and picking out and looking for microformats and be able to use this information to maybe not necessarily give it more like Google juice or higher search engine rankings, but if someone's searching on the page for Google, they can actually have some content formatted for the user. And that's always a good thing. But there's also a problem with microformats. You go to the next slide. Is that the BBC a couple years back found out that there was a problem with the microformats, and that the screen reader would actually read the content like that's kind of hidden in the microformat rather than actually content on the page. And so they actually had to pull support for microformats because of this. And so while microformats is really great, there's also could be some limitations with them. And we'll kind of get to what the limitations were back in the day and what the issues are. But I just realized that, even with this kind of great solution that from Concept and Microformats, it is kind of tough to build with this limited structure of HTML4 and XHTML. For the next slide, there's another problem is that, the web has changed. Like this whole Web 2.0, maybe we're now at Web 3.0, or 3.0, maybe we're at Web 5. Maybe we've gone Web Speed or gone Plaid, I'm not sure. But, the whole web has changed from simple pages to brochureware to e-commerce to, web apps, the whole concept of your website as an application rather than an informational catalog. And so we need to have our website kind of reflect that and build for that. And in our next slide, we now have video on our site. So we have like Chocolate Rain. Everyone loves great songs. Maybe not Chocolate Rain per se, but now we see video and share these videos with everyone else. And so that wasn't really the original intent of the web, but that's where we are right now. And XHTML doesn't reflect where we are now. It reflects kind of like this ideal image of what HTML should be. In our next slide. And so when I think about it, I think about this really great book called How Buildings Learn, and it's by Stuart Brand. And the concept is how, one of the concepts he touches on is no matter how perfect the architect will build the house, it's really the people who take it over and live and work in the building make it their own. And it changes from one family or one business to another. And so they'll make it in their own image and use the space in their own way. And so they'll make their own pathways in the house and their own design style and what have you. And so I think that's kind of how it's happening with the web is we had this great concept. We worked with it, and now we're trying to make it our own and pushing it to where we want it to be, which is very far and from its original vision, which isn't bad. It's just where we are. And whenever I think about, kind of the architecture, I think about a quote that's in our next slide from Frank Lloyd Wright, where he says, take care of the luxuries, and the necessities will take care of themselves. And I think that's really true with HTML5, is that we actually are kind of taking a step back and saying, this is where we are, for better or for worse. I think a lot of people would say, not for one day, we're a lot better for where we are for right now. So let's take that in and actually write a specification that addresses where we are now, and so that we don't have to fake ourselves and say, hey, even though 95% of websites are invalid, we're still going to do valid code. Let's just say, hey, let's just take what we are doing right now and accept them as best practices for what we want to do, and let's stop reinventing the wheel every time we have to. So with that, let's go to our next slide and just talk about our agenda items for today. And so where we are, we talked about what's different from XHTML to HTML5. What we're going to do next is probably talk about building with HTML5. And these are the next things that we could talk about is basic syntax, progressive markup, accessibility, geolocation, audio and video, and web forms. There's just so much stuff to cover, and we only have 60 minutes to talk today. So we might not cover everything, but I will definitely upload my slides and make them available to Wiley so they can distribute them too. So in case anyone wants to dive deeper, that's totally okay. So, and also prizes. The fine folks at O'Reilly will be keeping track of questions, and we'll be giving out copies of the brand new HTML5 Cookbook to people who give out really awesome prizes. So, and also, make sure to follow on with the hashtag HTML5 design too on Twitter. So we'll keep up with that. So, okay, and with that, let's start to our next slide, building with HTML5. And our first step we're going to talk about is the doc type on slide 18. And what doc types are really kind of like, there's always persistent thing with web development. And so in slide 19, I could never, ever remember the doc types are listed on slide 19, like HTML4 traditional PT doc type and XHTML 1.0 traditional. I can never, ever remember. I've been doing web stuff since 1993. I will always have to go search Google or do a search engine thing, find out what article that has it complete, and hopefully didn't bastardize the doc type and make it look foolish, and copy and paste it into my document or use it you already use a snippet in a web development tool, and so it's kind of kind of thing where like I don't remember it. However, in HTML5, the doc type is just simply, as shown in slide 20, just doc type in HTML. That's it. So I remember this plenty of times. Since HTML5 come on the scene, I've just fully embraced HTML5, and I can always remember doc type HTML. In fact, it's kind of foolish for me to have a snippet of this doc type because I can actually remember it, use it. That time it takes me to write out doc type HTML. It's probably faster than actually me trying to do a text expander thing or something like that. So it's pretty awesome. And the reason why we have doc type HTML is not because it's pretty smooth and pretty cool, which I guess that's a pretty factor, is that they actually researched what type of doc type would trigger standards mode in the various browsers. And they actually came down and found out that this doc type will actually will trigger standards mode, and they actually use that as a doc type for moving forward. So that's kind of why we're not stuck with, but using doc type HTML. And so, in our next slide, I want to just do a little demonstration on slide 21. You can see just go to the HTML validator at validator.w3.org, and make sure you do validate by input, which is what the little sign right there, pound sign is what we sometimes call in America, pound sign validate by input. And then just type in these three lines in the validator, and then hit validate and see what happens. And if you've never written doc type HTML, the HTML5 doc type, go do it right now and enjoy the freedom that it gives you. That you don't have to remember all the long doc type, and then type title small HTML5 and P hello world. And then once you do that, you'll see what happens in slide 22, is that it validates. This is like the world's smallest web page, and it's valid. You could never, ever, ever do this with XHTML. But XHTML, there's like so much overhead that you have to do to get to this point, and it's like you have to have the long XHTML. What else would you have to have? You have to have a head. You would have the head element, you have the body element, the closing HTML and the starting HTML tag, and put the B tag in there, make sure everything's. And so you just love overhead just to say hello world. And I think this kind of, so this is kind of just to show you you're up and running real fast, but also to show you that, hey, there's actually a validator for HTML5 right now. Even though it's kind of experimental, as shown in slide 23, it's still a useful tool that you can use right now and build for HTML5. So there's no reason to hold back on using HTML5 right now. In fact, we'll cover some things later on, in this session, to make sure that you can get up and running with HTML5. And so, but also there's another point is that HTML5 kind of addresses the point of that we initially started out with, was there's like 95% of the world's websites are invalid, and so HTML5 just makes this realization. It doesn't play games with itself and say that just because the site's invalid, that the browser is not going to render. Yeah, the browser's going to do its best and try to render the content the best as they can. And so what I feel like the HTML5 folks have done is say, we're going to be very forgiving in terms of bad code, because we realize people write bad code, but that doesn't mean that the web has to break. In fact, that would be kind of against the grain of what the web is about, is the web sharing information and not being a stickler about the validation of that code. So it's kind of pro content in a way, and making sure that the content gets out there rather than being a stickler about validation and stuff like that. So also a couple things about the doc type is the character set, as in slide 25. You just set the character set to Unicode. It's very easy to do, and that's what it looks like in HTML. And slide 26 just shows you that all you need to do for character set for Unicode is UTF-8, and you're ready to go for that. And some sites, there's a link at the bottom of the page talks about Google's vulnerability to cross-site scripting hacking, and they actually had to go in and actually add meta character set because just what the browser does with a character set, there's actually kind of leeway where people could actually get into and start hacking pages that might not have that character set. So that's something to look out for. Also, when you specify language, as in, on slide 28, you can just do HTML lang equals English or Eng or whatever language you want to use. And it's not really necessary, but it's something that's good to help the browser determine the best rendering method for your page. And also on page 30, slide 30, there's for link and script, you can actually just do links, rel style sheet, and have a href to your style sheet. And for script, they've dropped the support. You don't really need to have the type attributes. It just assumes that it's going to be JavaScript, and it's not going to be Visual Basic scripting or anything like that. So all you need really is script source, and you're ready to roll. So pretty awesome. And so moving forward, just some things about when you're actually coding up pages in the syntax. Is our next page for slide 31. Slide 32 shows you for HTML5, you don't need to have quotations around your attribute values. You can actually just get rid of them, and the page will still be valid. You can still do that. I'm actually of the feel of mind that you still want to have quotations around the attribute value. That's just the way, I guess, XHTML has been burned into my brain. Also in 533 shows you that you can actually have uppercase again with your element name, your elements, and your element attributes. You can do image source. And back in the day when I first started out, I would actually just do this because it was easier for me to scan the source code and find out where the HTML elements are versus the content in the web page. And so it was really easy for me. Also, back in the day with dinosaurs and whatnot, we're actually building out things with table-based layouts. So we had a massive amount of HTML elements, and so it's kind of hard to pick up the content within a web page. So, but also, slide 34 shows you is that you actually do camel case too, and actually have like a whole mixture of lowercase and uppercase characters and do all sorts of funky things. And in fact, with the Doctype, the Doctype doesn't have to be all caps either. You can actually do camel case and it will still be valid. So basically, the lesson here is just go crazy with your uppercase and lowercase characters if you want to. Also in 535, for in XHTML, you would have to have a trailing slash at the end of elements that were just standalone tags. And so with HTML5, you can go back to just having the image source be just not having the trailing slash at the end. In fact, when I teach students about XHTML, they constantly forgot about the BR and trailing slash for BR and image and sources. But so this is kind of a great relief for them that they don't really need to worry about that. It's just like, hey, the image, bam, we're done, moving on. So also, another thing that's really cool on slide 36 is that video controls, not video controls, but with attribute values in XHTML, if you had a Boolean attribute value, which means that just saying that, just by having the attribute in the HTML element, it means true. By not having it, it means false. But in XHTML, if you had an attribute value that was a Boolean attribute, you would have to say controls equals controls. Well, yeah, I just said controls, so therefore that's what I want. But no, yeah, in XHTML, you have the attribute value name, the attribute name, and then equals to the actual value, which would be the same value as that. And so that meant, so somehow that was a good idea back in the day. So we got rid of that. So all you need now to do this is just say controls, and that's cool. The browser understands, like, okay, you mean controls, it's true, and I'll go ahead and render the element accordingly. So that's pretty sweet. So and so as slide 37 shows, everything that was bad in 1999 is good again. So if you're a really bad coder with XHTML, don't worry, embrace HTML5, and you're good to go. So pretty awesome. So just a quick recap on slide 38. Basically, attribute quotes are not really required. Uppercase, lowercase are okay. You don't have to worry about trailing slashes for self-closing tags. And basically everything that was good in HTML4 is okay in and HTML5. So some other things that are coming back with HTML5, as shown in slide 41, is that you can actually bring back, there's actually the I tag is back. Also in slide 43, the B tag is coming back, and there's kind of a nuanced approach to what these tags mean, but it's kind of like once upon a time, it's kind of like for the B tag, it's kind of like just it's kind of tricky, but I think the fact that they have it here is mostly in mind for something, and just to have the B tag and I tag back and make it easier for people. So, but there's also in slide 44, the small tag is back, small element is back, and actually that has a specific purpose, mostly for kind of like small print, like with contracts, small print and contract. So small would be a perfect solution for that kind of thing right there. And slide 45 shows you that the abbreviation tag elements. I always get tag and element mixed up, even though I really mean element when I should mean tag. But abbreviation element is still here. However, there's no more acronym. And the reason behind that is because everyone, they kind of realize that, an acronym is actually an abbreviation, and therefore we should just have the abbreviation element going forward. So while they were really gracious in bringing back B and I, there's no more acronym. So we'll have a moment of silence before that might be in the presentation for acronym. Also, what's really cool is, as demonstrated in 47, let's have an example as shown in 47, where if you had multiple HTML element snippets, like on slide 47, where if you want to have a link for the heading and for an image below the heading to go to a different page or different whatever, in order to make it valid, you would have to have a link inside the block level element, and then you can't have a link outside of it, so it's really hard to do that. However, HTML5 just says, hey, you know what, browsers don't really operate that way, so let's just not do that. So you can actually have, in order to have valid code, you can have an href around a block level element and have like a whole module be a linkable thing. So it's really kind of cool. So, pretty sweet. And also, HTML5 brings in a new element on slide 50 called figure, and also another one called big caption. And so this is not just to replace images, because we actually put images in here, but it's mostly just to say, hey, there's some sort of element that has more illustrations or more illustrative content than just a photo. You can put it into a figure and also have like a big caption with it too. So, and also, you don't just need to put an image inside a figure element. You can actually use tables, audio, video, charts, and code snippets that go in there. Again, you think of figure not as a same thing as an image, but mostly as a container of content that's not necessarily straight HTML text or text in general or content like that, but content that helps that helps move a point further, that kind of illustrates the whole point going ahead. So tables like scientific data, or a quick like table for like almost like an info chart if you would a USA Today newspaper or something like that. So a really kind of simple thing like that. And also audio and video and stuff like that too. So that's pretty good too. Another cool thing is on slide 61 is the ability to have editable elements. You can actually edit a element within a web page and do really cool things. And so in slide 62 shows you all you need to do is say, hey, div content editable, and the page will actually, the browser should render, like you actually click on the text and start typing away. And so and one of the coolest examples I ever saw with this in a non-programming way was slide 63 is someone did a demonstration of CSS3 effects with trying to make kind of 3D type with a nice shadow with CSS3. And what was really cool is like you actually click on the text and type in what your own heading was or whatnot, and it was really just, it's really cool. So definitely go check it out. The link is there on the bottom of the slide if you want to go further. But yeah, so in order to make some kind of use with it, you actually need to have a JavaScript backend make sure to pull in the context of that. But with HTML5, you just need an HTML element attribute to just say, hey, this element, you can now edit it. So it's pretty cool. And slide 64, drag and drop. You can just, if you want to make an element draggable, all you have to do is say draggable up in slide 65 and just put attribute value, hey, this is draggable, so driver, and do that. So it's really kind of cool. So, and if you want more information, go check out html5doctor.com/native drag and drop. Pretty cool. So there's kind of like the new elements right there. And so, I also talked about microformats, and so and I still want to talk about microformats, but let's talk about 68, where on slide 68, where microformats, if you actually go check them out, their mission statement is that they're designed for humans first and machines second. And microformats are a set of simple open data formats built upon existing and widely adopted standards. And I have no idea what that means, pretty much. I know it's like, it says it's designed for humans first, but all these other open data formats and whatever, it gets kind of crazy. And one of the reasons why, and if you go to a website, you'll find specs, you'll find whole rationale behind microformats in a very scientific, almost too technical manner, and I think kind of helps freak maybe some entry level or beginning web developers out there. And so what I like to think of them as slide 69 as HTML5 patterns for common chunks of content that web builders like us need to mark up anyway. Oh, and by the way, Google understands them too. So it's really awesome stuff. So here's a breakdown of some of the HTML microformat patterns that are out there on slide 70. You have HAtom, HAudio, HProducts, HRecipe, HResume, resume I talked about before. So you have a whole bunch of common structures or patterns that we would use that we need to mark up anyway, maybe for our pages, that are right there. And so why wouldn't we want to use an open standard like that? So whereas HTML5 doesn't really cover that sort of thing. So when HTML5 doesn't cover something, we actually go and use this kind of method right here. So, but again, my thing is definitely try to look into using and actually picking up Emily Lewis's Microformats Made Simple if you want to dive deeper into it as a good entry point into microformats. And but also we have to add more data into our HTML elements. In slide 75, there's actually a new way to add kind of metadata into our elements. It's called the data attribute. And you can see here in this example, this is kind of just a mugshot for an image. Image source equals John Smith JPEG, but you have data hyphen image type mugshot. And so what you actually say, hey, within this HTML element, I can say, hey, mugshot. What type of image is this? Mugshot. This is really great. This is awesome. And that I can pinpoint this. And if there's some other examples too, where you can just pick a whole bunch of reasons for using data attributes. Like if you want to insert more like a color, like if you're doing a car dealership, you want to add type of what kind of car color, what kind of car makeup, model and year, if any type of more information that you want to have, but you don't want to have a whole listing of a whole bunch of information. You just list it out there. And then with having a data hyphen in there, you can actually use attribute selectors that are shown in slide 276, which is image data hyphen image type mugshot, and use the attribute selector to actually pinpoint which images are mugshots and isolate it with CSS rules and design them separately from other web pages. And also, what's really cool, if you do dabble in JavaScript and whatnot, is that you can actually use data attributes to help pinpoint and store information within HTML and have a jQuery plugin as an example that I'm working on with a plugin called HideSource, which basically allows for responsive and building responsive adaptive images for responsive web design. Is that if you want an image to be mobile only, that you'd only just use image source, but if you want to apply a higher res image in place of the lower source image, I actually have data hyphen high source equals file name in there, and so the high-res information image will take over with that. And so what happens is the jQuery looks to the image, looks for the attribute image there, will actually swap it out. And that's really awesome because we don't need to have, we just use a simple data attribute and we're good to go. Also use that. And so, and it's a really cool tool. I'm really glad that people like Mark Ransky and other JavaScript developers are hopping out building that little tool. So, and that's all possible through thanks to data attribute in HTML5. So it has a lot of cool flexibility. Now, it won't be useful for every web page that we build, but it's really cool to have it there. For page structure, as in slide 77, there's other HTML elements that are coming out there. So we're moving away from metadata and into page structure. Is that we have slide 78. Kind of looks like a kind of web page that we would have right now. Div ID header, div ID nav, div ID section, div ID article, side column, and div ID footer. So we just have a ton of divs. And as you remember what I told you earlier about divs, what HTML5 looked at was like, how are we building web pages now? Let's be honest with how we build web pages now and look at what people are doing. And thankfully, we have programmers and people, just to look at and browser vendors like Opera to go do all this research and find out what actually constitutes a majority of the web pages out there. And so they come back and say, hey, well, we know people are using header for header, using nav to indicate a navigation element, section, article, and the footer. So let's just be honest and say, hey, let's just have HTML elements that say that. And so slide 79 shows you that, yeah, you can have header, nav, section, article, and aside and footer as HTML elements. So there's no more need to have divitis and have like a whole bunch of divs in your page, and in fact just be more semantic in your markup with that. And so it's a really great way of just moving forward and streamlining the code, the markup, rather than having to deal with all that stuff like that. So every once in a while I get a question, what's the difference between section and article? So I ask people who are smarter than myself, and slide 80, I asked Mark Urbanski, who's a really good guy, who's a jQuery guy, and also did some HTML5. He actually co-wrote the geolocation chapter in the HTML5 Cookbook. And I asked him, like, hey, well, what's the difference? He's like, well, article is unique content to the document. Section is kind of thematic grouping, and aside is content that is related but not really important to that. And so that's pretty awesome. So I also asked, as seen in slide 81, Bruce Lawson, who's part of, I think he's part of the HTML5 Doctor, and also he's a really great evangelist for HTML5 for Opera. And I asked him the same thing. It's like, aside is tangentially related, article is a discrete piece of content, and that section also contains articles, for example. And so, I was taking a survey, so I asked more people. 82, slide 82, Molly Holschlag, who used to be an Opera standards evangelist, says that section clarifies div, article clarifies div ID content, and aside replaces div ID sidebar. And I love Molly because she actually answered me in bullet points, which is awesome, really quick to the point from my simple mind to grasp. But I think Chris Mills was awesome. He played it safe and just showed me a link to go look to at Boblet Tumble blog. So, but essentially, when you're dealing with markup and you come across the issue like what is the difference between article and section, just think about article as being what content is unique to this page that I'm building. So for a blog, it would probably be the blog post would be what would be contained in that article. But however, if you have comments for that blog, that should also be wrapped up in article. So you can actually have more than one article. However, you want to have that you can actually, and the idea is like you actually link to the article for that comment, for that content. So you basically can say like, hey, like this comment to this blog is kind of relevant, and I'm linking directly to the comment so that you can actually link to it. So it's actually an important piece of content in there. So we want to have that be wrapped up in an article. Whereas section, I kind of think of section as think about layouts and wireframes, saying like, hey, this section's over here is for the main column, if you will. Over here is like the side column. So that's what I kind of think of section. And a side is just kind of like content that's related to the main article, but not really deserving to be in the article itself. So that's kind of how I move through my thinking process with HTML5 elements. And moving forward on slide 83 is like, what about divs? And so divs are still around. Divs are still valid. If you like coding divs and like saying div equals header, div equals nav, div equals article, div equals footer, and div whatever, go ahead. It's still valid. However, I don't like seeing open divs on my page. I would want my page to be a little more semantic than that, but you can still go div crazy if you wanted to. And also, maybe there's an HTML5 element that doesn't really fall into what you're using, but you still need kind of a block level hook, if you will, for coding pages. And so HTML5 will allow you to just say, hey, just use div, and still use divs if you want to. In fact, I would recommend it if the other HTML5 elements aren't your cup of tea. And so, slide 84 shows kind of like a basic structure for an HTML5 page. You have your header, your nav, your section, article, next side, and footer. So nothing too crazy. This is just replacing what we saw with the wireframe, but more with HTML elements. And so what we can do is like just put this into a modern browser, and it will look like you see in page 85, or slide 85. And so you can see the heading, see the chocolate rain, the content right there, see the nav section. I will tell you that because you code things with HTML5 doesn't mean you get this rainbow effect automatically. HTML5 is full of unicorns writing rainbows, but it does not actually make your content full of rainbows and unicorns. So, however, I just want to say, like, hey, this is an example of the browser taking CSS rules, which have the colors, and applying them to the HTML5 elements, and doing so out of the box correctly, no weirdness whatsoever. However, if you take the same page and you apply it to an older version of IE, as shown in slide A6, IE6 says, like, wait a minute. You want to show me rainbow HTML5? Heck no, I'm not going to do that. And so what the page does is the older versions of IE say, like, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Those HTML elements aren't really my cup of tea. I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm just going to just render this page with vanilla type of rendering with my own style sheet, if you will, if you don't mind. And so trying to get around this kind of conundrum is that we actually stumble upon a really cool trick, is that shown in slide A7. We actually use a simple bit of JavaScript, document.createElements. You actually say, hey, I'm actually creating these elements, header, nav, section, article, aside, and footer, so please recognize them in your browser. And this was written up by John Rezig. He actually called it the HTML5 shiv, which I think he actually says, which is a little different than HTML5 shim. So shiv means totally different, but I guess he really, really hated IE. So once you add this bit of JavaScript to the page, as shown in slide 88, you can actually see the colors and the CSS rules get applied to an old version of Internet Explorer. So that's awesome. So we actually are able to get rainbows and unicorns into older versions of IE. So that's pretty awesome. So we can actually use HTML5 elements in our page today. So it's pretty awesome. So what I want to talk about next is on slide 89. It's progressively enhanced HTML5 and fused with this HTML5 shiv or shim. And if you remember back in the day on slide 90, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but the web was littered with best viewed with Microsoft IE and Microsoft Netscape buttons, like, hey, you really need to do this. And so what really happened was it's kind of called browser detection. And so what developers had to do was say, hey, we're actually going to have to, build a code base for one browser and then build another set of rules or code for another browser to get the best experience. And so, in fact, I remember having discussions about how IE was going to dominate the world and it's going to be awesome. And then Netscape browser back in the day would stomp all the other browsers and win because that's what Netscape was going to do. So, however, with realization that we have more than 2 browsers in the world, where the fact we have like hundreds of browsers on the web, is that we really can't build hundreds of websites for hundreds of browsers. So what we need to do is, instead of doing browser detection, we need to do what's called feature detection. And so in slide 91, it's a really awesome tool called Modernizer. And it's by a group of people who are really smart and dedicated. Frug, Paul Irish, Alex Sexton, and a whole bunch of other people who are really awesome. Hopefully, I'm sorry if I forget their names. But what Modernizer does, it actually allows us to easily do feature detection. And so it's slide 92. Basically, all you need to do is download it from modernizer.com, insert it like you would any other script, like jQuery or whatnot. And when the page loads, as shown in slide 93, is that you get all these class attributes to the HTML page, to the HTML tag, or HTML, starting the start HTML tag. And so what it says is like, hey, this browser understands Canvas, this browser understands geolocation, this browser understands RGBA, does all this, it understands these HTML5 cool things, it also understands these cool advanced CSS3 things. So we can actually do a whole lot of things in this browser that Modernizer is doing the testing for. And so what we can do with that, as shown in slide 94, is do CSS feature detection and say, hey, well, if the browser understands audio, then say, hey, do audio awesome CSS rules. If there's no audio, like, put an error right here and have these CSS rules in its place. So it's really cool to do that. With slide 95, we can actually do JavaScript feature detection and say, like, well, hey, if audio exists, which is if modernizer.audio, then we can do this function in JavaScript. So, and also we can actually say in slide 96, say, hey, if there's a feature in HTML5 that's detected, if like say in this example of 96, say if geolocation is supported, we'll just go to geolocation and load geo.js. If not, just load geopolyfill.js to kind of patch up the hole in this browser for it. So it's a really awesome tool for using that. And actually on slide 98, you actually do a whole bunch of more feature testing or pick out which versions of Modernizer that you want, not versions, but what features of Modernizer that you want. So you have font-based checks, you can do text shadow tests, media query testing, and SVG testing, and doing all sorts of cool things with Modernizer that you couldn't do. And so again, this is just to get away from doing just browser detecting and allowing us to focus on feature detection. And so when I mentioned earlier how Internet Explorer now is going to do auto updates, it's kind of the infinity version of the browser that we have with Google Chrome and Firefox now, is that they're pushing out updates and really kind of screaming at you if you don't update it after a while. And so the idea is just that in having to support various versions, that takes time and resources away from the browser vendors. They can actually just focus on getting you the latest and greatest to their user, their customer base. And that way, so we're not reliant on browser version numbers anymore. We really need to focus our design strategy to be more feature detection. And that's kind of like where HTML5 is. One of the cool things about HTML5 and the thinking behind it is going. And so we're almost out of the hour, so I want to see if I have room for any questions and see. I can probably rush through a couple things, but I really want to just make everything else less. Hi,
Christopher.
So.
Yaz here. Can you see the Q&A tab at all, or would you like me to read the questions out loud that came in?
No, I can't see. If you can read them out loud, that's great.
Yeah, we'll take them in the order they came in. John is...
I do. Before we get into that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you pull up slide 226?
Sure.
The third from the last. So yes, there actually are 226 plus slides.
There we go.
Okay. So I just want to go over some recommended books for everyone. I really love Universal Design for Web Applications by Matt May and Wendy Chisholm. It's a really great book. It's an accessibility book disguised as a book for how to build things correctly. And so I think of it as a book to build things correctly. Bulletproof Ajax for accessibility issues. Designing with Progressive Enhancement by the Filmic Group is a really great book that talks a little bit about kind of HTML5 canvas issues, but also kind of a really cool techniques to make them accessible. And Canvas, which we didn't get into today, which is kind of sad, but HTML5 Canvas is a great way of, it's an HTML5 element that allows JavaScript engineers or programmers to basically draw on and do really cool things and do like animations and games and do a whole bunch of cool things. I mentioned Microformats Made Simple by Emily Lewis, How Buildings Learn as well at the beginning of the talk, and of course HTML5 Cookbook by a whole bunch of cool people. Cal Simpson, who is my co-author, he's the JavaScript ninja. For the book, he covered a lot of the HTML5 Canvas and HTML5 JavaScript API, so if you're into that, I believe his talk is on January 24th, and I'm sure Riley will correct me if I'm wrong on that, but he does a really great talk, and if you're really into that, I suggest you checking that out. But I also want to give a shout out to Emily Lewis, who also wrote the Microformats book, but contributed chapters to the HTML5 cookbook. Anisha Popka did the accessibility chapter. Mark Urbanski and Christopher Deutsch did the geolocation chapter. Kimberly Blessing did a chapter on the web forms, which we didn't get to cover today, but really great chapter of web forms in HTML5. And also Christina Remy did a progressive HTML5 chapter there. So it was so my job was like lead cat herder, very much. Well, these great, awesome people do the HTML5 cookbook, so and I'm really happy to have it out there. So and if you go to the last slide, that'd be great. And I guess I'll take any questions. I guess now would be a good time.
All right, let's take some questions. Here we go. Okay, let's see here. Richard asks, how concerned should I be about backwards compatibility with browsers?
Can you repeat that one question one more time?
Yes, Richard asks, how concerned should I be about backwards compatibility with browsers?
I'm not really too concerned. Hopefully, I'm not sure when the question was asked, but with Modernizer and the HTML5 shim specifically, I'm not too worried about backwards compatibility, especially with concerns with the IE, and also with IE and Google and Chrome, and Google Chrome and Firefox really just kind of pushing down updates at a rapid pace now, at least rapid for Microsoft's point of view. Yeah, so I'm not really too concerned about that. In fact, Modernizer has a really active community base, and there was actually a couple of years ago, maybe like a year and a half ago to 2 years ago, there was actually an issue with older versions of IE that would have the shim that would not print correctly, and so there's actually they actually came up with a JavaScript solution that would actually fix it. So now HTML5 pages can actually be printed and actually old versions of IE. And there might be an issue where if you do JavaScript and you have to create elements on the fly, you might have to just resort to using divs and old school HTML4. So the browser like IE will recognize what you're doing. But I think for the most part, if you're not in that kind of category, you don't have to worry about it too much. So I would say just embrace HTML5 and enjoy it. So.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Daniel is asking, if article/aside/section are based on today's layouts, what happens when things change, like in the 80s web layout versus now? Is this ripe for misuse when things inevitably change and suddenly asides are being misused as tables once were?
Right. Well, I wish we could all go back to the 80s because that was just a cool decade. So, but I would say that that I wouldn't really worry about that too much because I think there was a lot of research that Google did, and I mentioned the research that the folks at Opera did in their study of what people were actually doing and building web pages. And so a lot of that came into like using header, using footer, and nav elements. And so like say, hey, well, we're doing this already with divs. Why don't we just take them out of the attribute values and use them as HTML5 elements? And so so I don't really see that changing too much. But if it does change, well, you just have to accept it and embrace it. I mean, it's what we build now is totally different than when we started out in 93, and so it's totally an awesome experience. And I don't really see it as a problem, as more of an opportunity going forward. So, and I don't think there's a change or challenge for the next couple of years anyway. So.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. We have time just for a couple more questions real quick here. We have also a question from Laura. Laura asks, when does it really make sense to change to HTML5?
Right now. Next question.
There we go. Okay. Carrie is asking, do you wrap your video file in the video controls tag?
So I wrap my video. Okay, we didn't get to touch about video, but yeah, so what we could do is, let me see if I pull up, let me see if I find the slide for you guys. Good question. 1 second. Sorry, guys. I'm going to find the video slide. Okay, so, no, that's not. That's not that one. All right. Almost there. Okay. Yeah, we didn't talk about video directly, and I can't really find the slide I really want to show you right now. But it'll be in the slide deck I'll upload and share with the Wiley folks. But for video, there's an HTML5 video element, and so we can do video and then have source for various for the various file formats that are out there. Not all browsers support every video codec out there. So what you want to do is wrap have your video files wrapped around a video tag, and then have source, which is a new HTML5 element associated with it. So it's a really kind of cool thing to do that you don't have to rely on Flash to pull it off. And in fact, there's a really cool JavaScript library called MediaElementsJS.com. So we just do a Google search for MediaElementsJS.com. And so what it will do is allow you to create cross-browser solutions for video with just using JavaScript and without having to do too much work with trying to code a whole bunch of different codecs. But you will still need to do, I think, a H.264 codec version and maybe an OGG file version if you need to. So, but yeah, so I wish I could talk more about that. But definitely check out Media Elements JS out there. It's a really cool tool.